What is nanotechnology? Well, a report that was put together by a combination of the Royal Society and the Royal Academy of Engineering that came out last summer, identified two topics. Nanoscience is the study of phenomenon and the manipulation of materials at atomic, molecular and macromolecular scales, where properties differ significantly from those as a larger scale. Nanotechnologies are the design, characterization, production and application of structures, devices and systems by controlling shape and size at the nanometer scale. So I'll talk a little bit more in a moment about what a nanometer is, but loosely speaking people think of nanotechnologies as being a sort of 100 nanometers or less.
The lives of distinguished people often take a lot of telling, yet even devotees might raise an eyebrow at the heft of Sir Paul McCartney's memoir, 2 volumes totalling 960 pages. Casual Beatles fans may be surprised by the title too, though most would consider Sir Paul the band's best musician, with an honourable mention for George Harrison. John Lennon typically gets the plaudits for writing. In a poll by the BBC in 2001 to rank the greatest lyricists, Lennon received more than twice as many votes as McCartney.
European market is a tough terrain for food delivery firms. Delivery Hero has had a good run in the past couple of years. In August 2020, it ascended to the DAX, the stock market index of Germany's most valuable listed firms. It is present in 50 countries on 4 continents. Revenue for the third quarter was €1.8 billion, that's $2 billion, a jump of 89% compared with the same period in 2020. We grew 100% before Corona, 100% during Corona, and we will grow 100% after Corona, says Niklas Ostberg, the Berlin-based firm's Swedish chief executive. By numbers of orders, Delivery Hero is more than twice as big as DoorDash, its large American rival.
It might sound obvious that if you want to improve a robot's software, you should improve its software. Agrim Gupta of Stanford University, however, begs to differ. He thinks you can also improve a robot's software by improving its hardware. That is, by letting the hardware adapt itself to the software's capabilities. As they describe in Nature Communications, he and his colleagues have devised a way of testing this idea. In doing so, they have brought to robotics the principles of evolution by natural selection. They've also cast the spotlight on an evolutionary idea that dates from the 1890s, but which has hitherto proved hard to demonstrate.
The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released the first part of its latest assessment report. The Earth is warming. Even with a drastic reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, temperatures will probably be 1.5 degrees Celsius above their late 19th century levels by 2050. Climate change is underway, the report laments, with all the environmental consequences that brings. The extent of the damage depends on the cumulative build-up of emissions and can be limited if the world strives for net zero carbon emissions.
Millions of people in North Korea are short of food. Perpetually hungry children and pregnant and nursing mothers are suffering the most. The World Food Program reports South Korea's landmark donation, the biggest in more than a decade, will help ease the nutritional crisis faced by 2 million of this particularly vulnerable group of people. Under an agreement worked out by WFP between both countries, South Korea will donate 50,000 metric tons of rice and $4.5 million in cash for food needs in North Korea.
A waterproof drone is being used by Australian scientists to collect the highly treasured nasal mucus of migrating whales. The snot is rich with fresh DNA, viruses, and bacteria, and it's collected by a drone that hovers over the blow whales of humpback whales as they embark on their epic annual journey along the Australian east coast. From Sydney, Phil Mercer reports.
Whales, like all mammals, need air and come to the surface to breathe through a blowhole. Vanessa Perotta, a marine biologist at Macquarie University, says that nasal mucus indicates the health of the whale.
India has downplayed the impact of U.S. plans to end New Delhi's preferential trade status that allows duty-free access to products worth $5.6 billion, saying that India has not assured the United States that it will provide equitable and reasonable access to its markets. U.S. President Donald Trump has directed the U.S. Trade Representative's office to remove India from a program that grants it preferential trade treatment. In 2017, India was the biggest beneficiary of the Generalized System of Preferences, which lowers duties on exports from about 120 developing countries. The Indian Commerce Secretary told reporters in New Delhi that India has no plans to impose retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods.
The World Health Organization says 12 years ago, India alone was responsible for almost 70% of all polio cases around the world. It calls India's success against polio one of the most significant achievements in public health. WHO officials say India's accomplishment proves the crippling disease can be eliminated in even the most challenging circumstances with a strong political commitment. The number of polio cases has decreased from an estimated 350,000 a year to 33 since the WHO launched its global eradication campaign in 1988. Heavy rains are expected to fall in a few weeks. Aid agencies are racing to shore up flimsy shelters and stabilize shaky terrain before the monsoon season begins. The UN Refugee Agency says the work ahead is monumental, but preparations are off to a better start this year than last. Aid agencies last year had to deal with a massive influx of more than 740,000 Rohingya refugees fleeing violence and persecution in Myanmar. They arrived over a period of a few months, straining local resources and requiring vast amounts of humanitarian assistance.
China is stepping up its efforts, announcing a long-awaited plan to link up its southern Pearl River Delta into a massive hub of technology, research, finance, and innovation. The possibilities and challenges of the project are both equally challenging and promising, according to analysts. Some describe the plan as an attempt to create a megacity to rival Silicon Valley, the U.S. technology powerhouse that is home to companies such as Google, Facebook, and Apple. But while Silicon Valley has a population of 3.1 million, the Greater Bay Area will link up 9 cities together with Hong Kong and Macau, with a total population of about 70 million, and the economic heft, state media argues, to drive the Chinese economy, let alone the world.
In an effort to encourage the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or North Korea, to dismantle its nuclear weapons program, the United Nations Security Council last year passed Resolution 2375, which imposes sanctions on North Korea. The United States is determined to strictly implement this resolution. Members of the UN Security Council, and by extension all UN member states, have unanimously agreed to fully enforce sanctions on North Korea, and we expect them to continue to honor those commitments, said Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
The United States and South Korea announced late Saturday the two countries will end annual large-scale joint military exercises as part of diplomatic efforts to achieve complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. In a statement, the Pentagon said Acting Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan and South Korea's Minister of National Defense, in a phone call Saturday, decided to end the Key Resolve and Full Eagle series of exercises. The decision comes 3 days after a summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Vietnam that ended without an agreement to resolve the North Korean nuclear crisis. Seoul's defense ministry released a similar statement, according to the Associated Press.
The government of the Spanish region of Catalonia has contradicted an assertion by the central authorities in Madrid that the jihadist cell behind twin attacks in Catalonia had been dismantled. The Interior Minister in the Catalan regional government, Joaquim Forn, said Catalan police were heading the inquiry and detectives were still searching for at least one suspect. At Turkey's request, the Spanish authorities have arrested the German-Turkish writer Doğan Akanlı. Mr. Akanlı, who's written extensively on Turkey's human rights record, is a critic of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. It's not known on what grounds Turkey issued the international arrest warrant.
Two former U.S. Republican presidents, George Bush Sr. and his son, George W., have called on Americans to reject racism and anti-Semitism. It's being seen as a rebuke to Donald Trump for his comments about who was responsible for clashes in Charlottesville on Saturday. Mr. Trump sparked fury when he again blamed both anti-racist protesters and white supremacists. One demonstrator, Heather Heyer, was killed. At her memorial service, her mother said the killer had wanted to silence her daughter, but had ended up magnifying her. President Trump has announced he's dismantling 2 advisory panels made up mainly of senior business figures. Several resigned in the controversy over the U.S. leader's reaction to events in Charlottesville.